This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeremy Wolf.
There's a version of you operating at 60%, and you've been calling that normal. But what if it's not? There's a lot of guys walking around out there thinking they're fine. They're not even close. Today, we're joined by Dr. Hal. Dr. Hal is the Chief Medical Officer over at GameDay Men's Health. GameDay isn't just another clinic. It's one of the fastest growing men's health companies in the country, with over 400 locations and on track for 1,000 by 2027, aiming to cross $1 billion in revenue. That's right, $1 billion in revenue. But what's really interesting isn't just the growth, it's why. Because behind that growth is a conversation about modern men, performance, energy, and what it actually means to operate at your full potential. Dr. Hal, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'm really stoked to get into this. We've met a couple of times in the past. I'm actually a patient of yours and a big advocate of the work that you're doing, because I've been doing a lot of men's work myself. And I notice a lot of people that are struggling out there. So I just want to start here, whether it's the guy that hasn't even started paying attention to his health, or one that's already kind of dialed in, but knows that he's got another level. What do you think is the biggest thing that's holding men back from actually performing at their peak capacity?
I think a lot of guys are just confused about where their health is because we just don't go see the doctor, right? About 70% of guys, 75% of guys won't go see a physician. So we don't have a baseline to start with. And then when they do go in, they're in for 7 to 10 minutes with their primary care doctor. They get some labs and then they're told to see them next year. By the time something actually rolls around, a problem actually rolls around, it may be a little bit too late, and then there are medications. So that's where I think some of the benefit of going to GameDay and why our model is so much different. We've removed, the insurance from the equation. Actually allows us to spend more time with patients, educate them, build individualized plans like you've seen, and then everything we do is physician-led. The goal is simple. It's just helping guys feel better, function better, and just show up better in their lives.
Yeah, man. What do you think it is? Like, I know going back, people used to go to the doctor, used to have the family doctor. People seem to used to have these deeper relationships with their healthcare provider. And now, as we move in the future, it's like there's this, it's just a, revolving door, essentially. Like you mentioned, you go in and they're kind of just checking the boxes, right? They're not really getting to know you and getting to figure out what the best course of action is. What do you think's going on there? What's the biggest driving factor that's creating this disparity between, like, in the health system that we see today?
Well, I mean, we have a third party that's involved. It's the insurance company. Yeah. And really the insurance company has a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, no one else. And me as a physician, I have a responsibility to my patient to try to take care of them as best as possible. But I'm limited as to what I can do based on what their insurance is, because their insurance isn't going to cover certain things. And then insurance only allows for a 15-minute visit. So if you go to your primary care doctor, who is probably a brilliant, student, who was a brilliant student.
Hold on. I have to stop you there. I apologize. I had no idea. The insurance only allows for a 15-minute visit?
Well, that's how much you can bill for, right? So So your day gets packed. As a primary care doctor, your day will get packed with 20, 25 patients. And how do you see a patient so when you came to see me, how long did we spend together? 45 minutes, an hour.
Oh, yeah.
If I did that with 20, 25 patients, I don't have enough time in the day. There's not enough hours in the day to do something like that. And insurance will dictate that, you've got to see X amount of patients during the day to bill a certain amount. And it sort of, that whole model, I think, is not serving the patient, the doctor. You're burning out the most brilliant minds in medicine. My wife is a primary care doctor who sees 20, 25 patients a day and works 12-hour days and then comes home and charts. So it's unfortunate that we've done that. But what GameDay has done is we've removed insurance from that equation. It allows us to spend, like I said, much more time with the patient, really getting to know them. And then building a plan around what's important to them, not what's insurance is going to cover.
Yeah, the insurance conundrum is really disincentivized people from getting the care that they really need. And I've had folks on the podcast too that work with the direct primary care model, which is another alternative to the traditional insurance, where you have more time to spend with the doctor, you have more access to the doctor, and therefore you can get more healthy. But how much of this do you think is the problem with the insurance versus people just not taking care of themselves nowadays, right? Because people are so disconnected from their health, from everything.
I mean, sometimes it feels like there's a lack of responsibility, but then if as a doc, and if I tell you, hey, I need you to diet and exercise, and then send you on your way without a game plan, is that fair to you either? If I'm supposed to be the expert, and I should be sending you to, a registered dietitian, someone who can teach you how to eat if you're not eating properly, have health coaches and personal trainers that are trained in sports medicine, that are trained in therapies that can help you with your exercise routines. So I have those experts on my team where I can refer out to. That's my responsibility. I'm sort of the quarterback, but I can't just leave you to, on your own. There is certain personal responsibility to that, but I feel like we need to give more people the tools. Otherwise, they're lost. And there is an awakening, however. I think guys our age, the younger generation as well, that's really saying no to the traditional healthcare sick care model and taking a hold of their health and sort of getting in front of it.
Yeah, 100%, man. So, Dr. Howe, when guys walk into your office, I know you're dealing with all sorts of patients over there, right? People that are just getting started on their journey, that are having deficiency issues, things like that. Then high performers that are trying to optimize their health. What are they typically telling you? Like how are men feeling day to day? What's going on in their lives from a health perspective?
I think the number one thing that I hear from our patients is fatigue. It's just that they're running themselves ragged, or they're stressed out. They're not sleeping, and that's probably the number one thing I'm seeing out there.
So lack of sleep is the number one driver.
Lack of sleep, just fatigue, lack of energy. Some of the guys, they're coming in with central adiposity, just getting that dad bod and not being able to sort of get rid of it after a certain age. Difficulty in the gym, whether it's not hitting personal bests anymore, or just not having the motivation to go into the gym, and then that directly affects energy levels. That directly affects how you perform with your children and how you are with your wife, and then that leaks into your work life, and that can sort of spiral on its own. It's not one thing that happens. It's accumulation of a bunch of small things that happen, and then you realize, oh man, I'm not the guy I was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and it gets. You mentioned as we get, men of our age, right? As we get older, often at least what I'm experiencing is our perspective tends to shift about how we take care of ourselves. And do you think it's more of an awareness issue for guys? Like they just don't know any better, or an action problem? Like they know what they need to do and they just don't do it. Like you said, for lack of motivation, whatever it is, lack of this or that, like where's the line there?
Well, the low energy, the weight gain, the brain fog or low libido, I think we have confused that with just aging, and it's not just aging. It's your body telling you something's off, right? So we need to look at the bigger issue, and I think most guys are waiting too long. If you start to get, and I don't really like using this word optimize, but if you get optimized earlier, you're not just going to feel better, but you're going to perform better, show up better in business, in life, with your family and everything else.
So you don't like the word optimized?
It feels a little marketing-ish.
It feels what?
It feels like a marketing word, whereas I'm looking at it from a health standpoint, right? It's I guess what would be a better word than optimized? Just feeling better, honestly, like the best version of yourself, rather than, because your optimization may be different than my optimization. Your numbers in terms of hormone replacement may be different than mine. Your weight, all of that may be different than mine is. So what is really optimal? It's the best for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's different. Everybody's got different physiology. Everybody needs a different treatment plan, if you will. But I think where a lot of people fall short when it comes to this idea of feeling optimized, for lack of a better word, is they feel like you always have to be optimized. And I think life is more about balance. I've talked a lot about this lately, where like we're human beings, right? We're going to have peaks, we're going to have valleys. I think that like the goal is to increase your baseline over time so that the peaks become higher and the valleys also become higher. And then it's a question of like how quick you can get back to baseline when you experience a dip.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just, as you get older, it feels like that bounce back doesn't happen as fast as it used to.
That's why they got to come see you, my friend.
Yeah.
So what would you say that guys are getting wrong right now? Like what are they calling normal that really isn't normal?
I mean, if you look at testosterone ranges over the last 20 to 30 years, the decline of 20 to 30% across the board, looking at that range of 300 to 1200 total testosterone, if we look at such a wide range, and then that number is slowly starting to decrease over the last, it's going to decrease after age 30, 1 to 2% a year, accelerates after age 40. But then we're seeing an even bigger decline over the last 20 to 30 years. I think that's, it's becoming more and more dangerous, I think. Low testosterone is just as bad as high testosterone. There's there's cardiovascular issues that come from it, neurovascular issues that can come from it. It's not just libido and sex. There's a lot more attached to hypogonadism, low testosterone, and testosterone deficiency than most people would think. Anemia, bone density, brain fog, cognition, executive function, decision-making, pragmatic decision-making, all of that is directly affected.
I want to double click on testosterone for a second, because I think a lot of folks out there, they hear that word as you get older. A lot of men, as you get older, you hear about low testosterone. I don't think a lot of people really know what testosterone even is, what its functions are, and then why it declines over time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it's the main male hormone, right? So it's directly responsible for your male features, let's call them. But then, like I said, it doesn't just affect that. It doesn't just affect your libido, sex drive, how you look as a man, but it definitely can affect decision making, bone density, anemia, cardiovascular risk, dementia risk. But what I think the biggest misconception is that, the men's health is just about testosterone. It's just a tool. It's not the whole toolbox. If you go to the different clinics that are out there, all clinics are not the same. There's a difference between going to a clinic that's run by a physician, and then there's a difference going to places that are out of their scope. And when I say physician, I mean a medical doctor. So, all these things that we do in clinic, the hormones, the peptides, the weight loss medications, really powerful therapies, but you got to remember, they can absolutely change lives, but if you do them wrong, they can cause real harm. And you want to make sure that you're going to a place that understands all of that doesn't just go and hand you a script, that's going to talk to you about all the big stuff, how your diet is, how your sleep is, how's your stress levels. If you're reducing harm, like you and I talked about, if we could possibly naturally raise your well-being, that'll naturally raise your testosterone levels as well. And then maybe you don't need to add on a medication.
Is low testosterone and decreased levels, is that just a natural byproduct of aging like everything else? Or do you find some men that just maintain normal levels all the way until they get older? Because I know obviously it's different for every person, but I just find this fascinating how the human body works.
I have patients, I would say in their 70s, 80s, that their testosterone levels are lower, but they don't have any symptoms. They don't present with hypogonadism. Those are not patients that need hormone replacement therapy. But then if you look at 3/4 of the American male is overweight or obese. Obesity is the number one cause of low testosterone. And then low testosterone causes you to hold on to fat, and it makes you fatter, right? So you're in a vicious cycle there. That's what starts to happen. Sedentary lifestyle. I mean, we sit at our desk for 12 hours a day. So the lack of exercise, and and I'm talking about strength training, really, that decreases testosterone levels as well. Higher stress levels, because cortisol competitively competes with the receptors, testosterone and cortisol. So if you have more cortisol on board, you're going to have less testosterone on board. Same thing with, the harmful substances, alcohol, drugs, smoking. All of that can definitely lower testosterone levels. Your sleep is directly correlated to testosterone levels. I think you and I had talked about this the days that my 2-year-old has a rough night. So everybody has a rough night here. I can almost, and because I have the lab in-house, I've tested my testosterone levels, and I always find 2 hours of sleep will drop my testosterone levels about 200 points. So wow. It's almost a direct correlation with that. And just, social connections are huge as well, because if you're not happy, or if you're not well adjusted, that can definitely affect it as well. Depression can be masked as low testosterone, and vice versa.
Do you think that for somebody, you mentioned you have people you see that are 70 that have lower actual levels, they don't experience any symptoms. How much do you think of that is tied to the mindset that somebody has? Because again, like you mentioned, depression, a lot of these things play into, the mind and the body is so connected, right? A lot of these things play into how you conceptualize things in your mind, and that probably feeds your physiology to some degree. So do you notice that the people that aren't experiencing symptoms, so to speak, are people that are just coming at it from a better mindset? Maybe they just take care of, they do the habits, they do the things. They might feel, all things considered, they might feel physically, maybe they feel achy and painy. They're just not complaining about it.
Those are patients who have 70-year-old joints, 70-year-old muscles, and 70-year-old ligaments. All of those things are going to be, they're older, right? In the hospital system, I used to explain that to my patients, that you have to look at your system like a car, and the alternator, the battery, the engine, everything is 70, 80 years old. So things are going to start breaking down. Does that mean you can still, they're going to stop working? Not necessarily. You can keep them up. You and I know, the perfect example in one of our groups, who, if we checked his testosterone levels, they'd probably be a little bit lower because he's in his late 70s, but he works out every single day. He's one of the most positive people I know. He's happy all the time, engaged, has zero bad habits. So that's someone that doesn't have testosterone deficiency. Maybe they have age-related decline in testosterone, but I don't think that's a person that has a testosterone deficiency. Two different things. And it's definitely his mindset that has caused him to live that way.
Peptides, another thing, another buzzword out there.
Sure.
Hear a lot today about peptides. For those that don't know, what are peptides, and then specifically the types of peptides that you're hearing about now in the news that they're talking about are really revolutionary, but then you have a lot of people that are highly critical of it.
Sure.
Speak on that for a minute.
Peptides, the easiest way to explain it, they're just signaling molecules, right? They're going to interact with something in your endocrine system, your metabolic system, or your regenerative pathways. So unlike what we were talking about earlier, traditional pharmacological agents that will override your physiology, your own body's natural processes, peptides are going to amplify or mimic those signaling cascades. So GLP-1s, that's the one that's made it most famous, right? We're talking the Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, things like that. It will release hormones from the gut in response to food intake. So it slows down gastric emptying, slows down the food in your stomach, and then it tells your brain that you're full, and that's how you lose the weight. So that's one example. And then you have the newer ones that people are talking about all the time, the growth hormone peptides. Instead of directly affecting growth hormone, it will stimulate pulsatile growth hormone release rather than just replacing growth hormone directly.
Pulsatile?
So sort of like the most physiological way. Growth hormone is released in deep sleep at nighttime, and it's not constant. So when bodybuilders used to take correct, yeah. When bodybuilders used to take growth hormone by itself, that's like a blunt instrument, and replacing growth hormone directly, and that's where all the side effects were coming from, I think. And this is the newer peptides they're just stimulating growth hormone releasing hormone to release growth hormone in your body in a more natural fashion. And then I think the most famous peptides right now are the regenerative ones, right? The ones that people talk about, BPC 157.
BPC 157.
Yeah, and that you hear about on every single podcast out there. When you ask the podcasting host what it actually means, and they just tell you, it's the Wolverine. It's going to make you regrow. I think the education lies in it causes something called angiogenesis. Genesis is just creation of new stuff, right? Angio is blood vessels, right? So it's creation of new blood vessels. That's what it does. How does the body heal? It sends growth factors, sends stem cells and exosomes and all those fancy words, but it happens through blood flow. So these peptides cause more blood flow to an area that's damaged. It can also cause fibroblast activity. And fibroblast is a misnomer. You would think blast is blowing up. No, fibroblast is actually it's creation. You're creating more activity. And then the inflammatory signaling, decreasing inflammation in the body. So it's clinical implications here is like someone who's got a decent working system, a baseline physiology, they may do really, really well with this because you're stimulating the body to do more of its own processes. Now, someone who is beyond what a peptide can do to help them, that's where I think a lot of the misconception is. It's patient selection, right? You can't just go online and click 2 buttons and decide that you're going to go on a peptide. You need to have physician oversight, some baseline labs, and then monitoring for side effects, and then patient selection. Also, none of these websites that you can order from really will tell you if it's a research only, or they'll call it clinician use only or whatever. Those are coming from China with zero oversight. There's no real third-party testing because they're not testing every batch. They're sending out a vial, and then you see these certificates of authenticity they post on their websites, and I'm like, you can create a PDF now in ChatGPT in 20 seconds. So you just got to be really careful with that stuff. That's my only concern really with peptides is patient selection and the lack of physician oversight.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of people that end up using these tools as like a crutch instead of a supplement. I guess what I mean by that is, like, for instance, I mentioned before the show, my shoulder's hurting, right? Like, you can go and get peptides, right? Inject them in the shoulder. And it's probably that in and of itself might help your shoulder feel better. But if that's all you're doing, that is not a long-term solution to the problem, right? That is probably going to stop working at some point. You're going to have other issues. Like, these types of medicines and tools, they need to be used in conjunction with a healthy lifestyle, with diet, with exercise, all these different things. And they need to be used as supplements and not as magic bullets, right? Like, everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody wants a pill, wants an injection to fix the problem. Do you see that a lot? I mean, obviously you talked about patient selection. You're trying to work with people that are trying to optimize themselves. But do you see a lot of people coming in and trying to just use these things as a quick fix?
Absolutely. I mean, they'll come in with a repeat injury. And some these peptides do work with improving healing in tendon, ligament, muscle injury. They absolutely do. But like you said, if you're not working on the big stuff, if you're not making sure that you're stretching and warming up and taking time off when you need to, eating right and making sure that you're not in an inflammatory state to begin with, then it's not gonna be as effective as some of the claims out there. And remember, a lot of the human data is really limited here, and then dosing isn't standardized, the sourcing isn't standardized, so it's reasonable to use it. But if you're not doing all the other big stuff, then it's kind of pointless.
It's just a Band-Aid at that point.
Yeah, and it's not even a good Band-Aid if you're not set up for it, right?
Yeah, you're masking the underlying problem, and even if it helps temporarily, you're probably going to hurt yourself in another way later because you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah,
makes sense. Why is it so tough for us to do the things on the day-to-day? That's the $1 million question, right? It's so easy. Put the habits, put the systems in place, just do the work.
It's the human nature. We want things fast, instant gratification, and then it's the quick fix. Absolutely is something that we deal with all the time. I used to, when I was seeing hospital patients, we used to get the sickest patients in there, and they were super sweet. They were all from these nursing homes around us. And I just remember having these conversations with them, like, can't you fix this? And I'm like, I can't do in 5 days what it took 50 years to get to this point, right? It took
It
a
doesn't
lot
work
of
like
hard work
that.
to get there. So, and it sucks having to have those conversations, but you try to optimize as much as you can, and unfortunately, it's you're fighting a losing battle sometimes. But I think people are getting healthier overall.
Well, that's good to hear. One more thing on the subject of testosterone and peptides and steroids and things like that, and then I want to shift and move on to something else. I think a lot of people, they hear about human growth hormone, they hear peptides, and then they lump everything together with like this idea of steroids, right? Just like something about injecting yourself with something.
Sure.
What's the biggest difference between the steroids that you hear from the bodybuilders that are trying to pump their muscles up specifically, and then something like taking human growth hormone or the peptides for that matter?
Or you mean human growth hormone peptides, not necessarily human growth hormone, because human growth hormone is illegal for the use in anti-aging in the United States.
Okay.
So steroids, like what you're talking about, the bodybuilders and the back of the gym transactions,
like the Primobolan, the Winstrol, those things that are
those are highly therapeutic window medications, because they're medications. They were used. I think Anabar was used in like patients with the kidney failure, cachexia with cancer patients who needed to put on muscle quickly. But they've got such a narrow therapeutic window that even they're not first, second, or they're like third line medications for those indications, and people are abusing them to try to put on muscle quickly. What they don't realize is that they're causing cardiac remodeling, changing the muscles in the heart, and that's dangerous. It can be deadly. Some of the most healthiest looking guys on the internet are ticking time bombs. Who we're talking about, the jacked, bald-headed guys that are shilling peptides all over the place with hundreds of thousands of followers. They look great, but I bet if you were to do an echo on some of these guys, you would just see the fragility of their aortic lining from all of the damage that they've done using some of these anabolic steroids. And you don't realize until that damage is already done. But I, as a physician, I'm in constant contact with hundreds of physicians across the country. I have a lot of friends who are in the ER, in the ER field, and they always tell me, it sucks seeing some of these guys come in who are just absolute, they look like they're the healthiest people out there, and they're coming in with aortic dissections, just a torn apart aorta from all the elastin and collagen damage that they've done over the years, using higher than normal testosterone levels, or these other anabolic steroids, and they don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And it's unfortunate, and then those are the people that are out there educating other folk. Meanwhile, you have your primary care doctor who may be 20, 30 pounds overweight, trying to give you advice, and you're like, why would I listen to that guy? I'm going to go listen to that influencer online who speaks in absolutes, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think. I lost my train of thought there for a second. I thought I had something good. Oh, that's okay. It'll come back in a minute.
Remember, patient selection, making sure that you're very, very careful about the protocol and monitoring closely, and then expectation management. Like you said, these are not magic bullets. And I think that's where the physician-led care really separates from someone who's going to tell you it's the end-all be-all, and they just happen to have the thing that they're saying is amazing. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's amazing what people will do to themselves over vanity. And I just want to, I think what you said is very useful. And I want to give a reminder to the audience out there. Like, we're so attached nowadays to social media, to our screens, and watching people's lives. And so many, like to your point, so many people out there are putting out this facade, right? And they're putting it out in a way. And I think we have a tendency to compare ourselves to others. And so we look at somebody and like, why are they like that? And then we drive ourselves crazy trying to get to that level that we can't achieve naturally. And it's just, it's a toxic cycle, really is.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
What was it?
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of us end up where we're at in life in terms of what we're doing, our mission, our career, because of the things that have influenced, the factors that have led us there. how did you arrive at this concept of GameDay Men's Health? I know, if I'm not mistaken, this is still a startup, right? You're what, 2 years in?
2 years in. Yeah.
So like this is still an emergent concept, and you're blowing up right now. What led you to launch this model? Was there something that happened in your own personal life in terms of your health that was the impetus for this project?
I mean, this was so GameDay Men's Health was started in 2017 by Evan Miller, a buddy of mine out in California. He had just sold one of his businesses, moved to Hawaii, and was looking, felt like something was wrong, low energy levels, and just couldn't figure out why in his late 30s, early 40s that he's starting to feel this way. And everywhere he went, it was either the cold doctor's offices or these TRT mills. And he decided to create GameDay for a place where guys can actually go and not be treated like a number and not be sold something that they don't necessarily need. Built a concierge model. Guys walk in, they get real answers, same day labs, physician-led plan, and get them back to feeling like themselves and better than they were before, right? So he started that, and then during that time, I was actually practicing hospital medicine and then clinic medicine. I ran large systems across the Midwest in Florida. Made it up to about chief medical officer, and then got to 255 pounds. This was in 2023. My wife said, "I want to have a baby, and you are borderline diabetic, you're hypertensive, you have cholesterol through the roof. You're 10 years from a heart attack max. And if we have this baby, are you going to be around to take care of the child with me?" It was sort of like an aha moment for me. Like, oh man, nothing really matters at that point, right? Like all the career success, all that doesn't matter if you're not around for your family. So I quit my job and lost 70 pounds, found GameDay, and just realized that it was exactly what I had needed. And we started opening clinics on the East Coast. I was the first franchisee on the East Coast. That was back in September 23. We signed our first lease. And then my son was born the 10 days after we opened. 10 days before we opened, actually. 10 days before we opened, my son was born. And then we opened another clinic and then another clinic. And then we became training facilities for the entire nation. And we trained between 100 and 200 clinics through our clinics. And then early last year, Evan sat me down and said, "You're going to take over as chief medical officer. I like what you guys are doing. It's very academic. I see that, your background." So I said, "Okay, take me to dinner first, but okay." So, and it was just off to the races. And since then, we've doubled in size. We've created GameDay University, which is a very strenuous educational platform with, years now, hundreds of hours of video and lecture series that we've done, not just myself, but like, urologists, endocrinologists, different specialties that come and present to our system. And we're just trying to take an industry that's maligned, that is filled with bad actors, that's, has folks that are practicing out of scope for sure, has folks that are prescribing medications and giving medical advice without medical licenses. They may call themselves a doctor, but they're not really a medical doctor, or they're med spa folks who really should stick to aesthetic practices. And this is medicine. So I want to, first and foremost, I'm a patient advocate. Everything else is second to me. So if we can do the right thing by every patient every time, like Evan says, the success is going to follow. And that's what's happened. We've become the largest in the world, not by accident. It's by putting patients first.
It's really impressive to watch what you're building there. Do you think it's like the secret sauce behind you just said patients first, but like, is this just the perfect storm of a broken healthcare system, men just being fed up, having enough, and then you just being right time, right place, getting together with the right people? Like, what is the secret behind scaling this quickly? Because there's so many people out there that are in business that are struggling to get by, and you guys are just, like you said, exploding. You're on track to have 1,000 locations by 2027.
Yeah. I think it's just a single-minded head down and let's do the work. That's what we've been doing for the last year. The entire executive team works 16 hours a day, and then each individual franchise owner probably puts in that amount of time as well. We're in constant contact. We're not one of these franchisees or franchisors that sort of leaves people to figure it out. We're in the weeds with them. We're all clinic owners as well, on the executive team as well as on the franchisee side. So we're all in the trenches together. I have a medical advisory board made up of board certified clinicians, physicians across the United States that are also clinic owners that sit on my medical advisory board. Those are the guys that I lean on whenever we're pushing out different medications or different service lines to the system. We partnered with some of the greatest marketing folks out there that looked at us and said, wow, you're not if you look at some of the folks in this industry, they're just marketing companies, really. And then if you dig down into it, there's not much substance there. What they looked at was like, oh my God, you're a health system and we can market this. So it sort of flipped it up on its head, and it's been a lot of fun. I don't pretend to know everything, which is why I have urology on my board, and why I have urology on the greater partnerships across the country. In Weston alone, we've got Cleveland Clinic urologists that I've got on speed dial. The urologist actually is the next door to me in the same building. So we stay in our lane, and if we're out of scope, we're very quick to refer, which I think is a testament to being really good at what we're really good at, and then trying not to go outside the lines.
I think that's one of the biggest answers to the current healthcare epidemic, right? It's creating alternatives, viable, sustainable alternatives to the traditional healthcare insurance system that we've operated under for so long. Clinics like yours, these direct primary care models, the more of this that becomes available, right, the more pressure it'll pull off the system, and the system will have to evolve around that, and you'll have more parity and more balance throughout the whole game, if you will.
Your mouth to God's ears. If that happens, that would be incredible for all of us.
So you own 3 specific locations, if I'm not mistaken. You have Weston, there's one in Boca. Talk a little bit about the locations that you have locally here, and then maybe how folks out there could learn more and find out more and visit you guys.
Sure. So, I personally own Aventura, Boca, and Weston, and then I've got another 7 territories, but I look at GameDay as one system. So we've got Miami Lakes, we've got Wellington, West Palm Beach, Delray Beach, Vero Beach, Space Coast. There's 30 locations in Florida alone, and there's probably going to be 100 by the time we're done in Florida. So what I would do is just go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com and find your nearest location. Tell them you saw Dr. Hal and you're interested in finding out more. We do complimentary testing. So your initial consult will be complimentary. It's on us, and we do the initial lab testing on us as well.
Beautiful. What's the long-term vision? I know, if I'm not mistaken, you said you're branching off into other countries as well. What's the 5-10 year vision for GameDay Men's Health?
So as of this point, we're the largest in the world, but we're just not everywhere outside of, we're in Canada and we're in North America, Canada and America. But the plan is South America, Dubai, the UK for sure, the Caribbean for sure. And that's probably going to happen within the next couple of years. There's a ton of interest already. And really what I envision GameDay is to continue to evolve. We're never going to chase the shiny new toy that's out there. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be evidence-based and guideline-based. And so we may seem like we're slowing, we roll out things slower than some of these longevity practices that have every toy in the book. But I want to do what's appropriate for patients and what's going to move the needle, not just what looks cool and what biohackers are talking about on the latest podcast, because that percentage point that you're going to get from that that improvement, it's probably not going to move the needle. I would say 95% of people. And then you're going to spend a bunch of money, and we're going to be right back to where we started with healthcare, where you don't have the outcomes and where we've spent more money than everybody else in the world.
Indeed. For someone listening to this who knows that they're not at their best, what's the first step they should take?
Make an appointment. Give your nearest GameDay a call and tell them you'd like to come in. The cool thing about being a concierge practice, we usually have a spot available within the next 48 hours because we leave something open in case the patient needs to come in. So you'll be able to get an appointment much sooner than you would. Call your primary care doctor today, your insurance-based primary care doctor today, and see if you can get an appointment within the next 60 days. Very unlikely. At GameDay, it'll be within 48 hours.
Beautiful. Love it. We will, of course, drop a link in the description below to all your contact information. Dr. Howell, I'll give a personal testimony here real quickly. I am a patient of yours. I started seeing you at the clinics, I think about 4 months ago. Top notch, the entire process from A to Z. Really felt like I was in good hands. Like you said, we had a chance to sit down and talk for a while. You really tried to understand what was going on in my personal situation, in my life, and really, you had a vested interest in bringing out my full potential. And we've been working together, and I've seen vast improvements in my life, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing and what you're building. It's fascinating to see, and I wish you the continued success moving forward in this project, my friend.
That means a lot. And some days, the workload can get a bit much, but then when you hear stuff like that from your own patients, it puts the fire right back on. And so I appreciate that.
Of course, man. Keep up the good work. And everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, if you found this useful in any way, you know the drill. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We always love to hear your feedback. And remember, take care of yourself. We only have this one life to live. Let's make sure we live it to the fullest. Everyone, take care. Stay blessed. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast, Cooper City. To nominate your favorite local business to be featured on the show, go to gnpcoopercity.com. That's gnpcoopercity.com, or call 954-231-3170.